Hi guys. Tonight's episode of System Me ASMR is going to be very different. Tonight I will be using my voice for all of the women who can no longer use theirs. Tonight we are going to go over my thoughts on the Gabby Petito case from the viewpoint of a domestic violence survivor. For those of you who may be new, I was in a domestic violence relationship for 6 years. It was longer legally due to some archaic Michigan divorce laws, but a solid 6 years of living in domestic violence. During that time, I experienced physical, emotional, mental, financial, and sexual abuse. It ended when my son and I literally fled the state after he was arrested, after an officer told me the next time he got a call, it would probably be to retrieve my body, because it took them 45 minutes to get to the remote location my abuser had us living. There is a narrative many internet trolls are pushing that Gabby was the abuser in this situation. Those people are basing their opinion off of what the officer stated during the highly publicized confrontation that was caught on body cam. This is why narcissistic abusers are so dangerous. So let's talk. During my 6-year relationship, I myself was arrested for domestic violence. The charges against me were dropped and expunged from my record. But let's discuss how that came about. Sorry, I keep looking down. This case makes me very emotional. I, from the beginning, have said that I'm going to be real with you guys, and I'm going to show you the good days and the bad. And as much as I try to, close it out, I don't have cable, so, I don't watch the 6 o'clock or whatever news. But even my best friend who helped me escape texted me this evening, and I know it was because of Gabby, because she just said, whenever I see a domestic violence case on the news, I'm just so glad that you're alive. So while I was dating my ex, there were no instances of abuse. We were married in mid-November, and the first instance of domestic violence, at least physical violence, there was emotional violence that Thanksgiving. But the first instance of physical violence occurred on Christmas Eve, the month after we were married. We went to his parents' house for Christmas Eve, and he caused an argument because we had all planned to go to midnight mass together at the Catholic church his family had attended all his life. Suddenly, at about the time we were getting ready to leave to go to the church, he said that he was embarrassed to be seen with me at the church. We returned to our apartment, and he became physically abusive. Sorry, I'm trying not to shake. He put me into a sleeper hold and told me to just go to sleep, bitch. The venom in his voice was terrifying, and I believed I was going to die. I can't even tell you how that incident concluded, but I know afterwards he blamed serving in the military and PTSD and made me genuinely feel sorry for him. He lied a lot. He was very manipulative. I was led to believe all sorts of things, and I guess I just had no reason not to trust him. I mean, his mother is pretty equally crazy as him. So when he told me that his parents were addicts and he was raised by his grandparents, I believed him. Later I would find out that all of that, and even his military narrative, was false. He did go to boot camp, but he obtained a medical discharge and was out of the army before he ever saw combat. But he still had lots of stories where he convinced me that, because I don't know how they train. Sorry, my brain is just, this is hard. I don't know anything about military training. There was never a chance I was cut out for that kind of life. So he described, live grenade accidents and stuff, watching people die, and I don't know why, but I didn't have any reason not to believe him. I became convinced he needed help, which he agreed to get, but would later deny. Incidents of a similar nature continued, with him breaking my cell phones so I couldn't call police, until, ironically, on his parents' wedding anniversary in February. At that time, he once again attacked me and destroyed my cell phone, but a neighbor heard my screams as he beat my head against the floor, and they called the police. When the police broke in, they found him standing over me, trying to hit me in the head with a metal chair. I think 1960s to 1970s adult classroom chairs. It was very solid and very heavy. And I knew that if he hit me with it at the very least, I was going to lose consciousness. I'm sorry. I thought enough time had passed that I wouldn't be this emotional talking about some of this stuff. But, I do have PTSD from it all. And watching that body cam footage has given me lots of flashbacks. They put him in cuffs and brought me out to the living room and questioned me. I admitted to trying to kick him in the genitals to prevent myself from being knocked unconscious. I didn't want to press charges because I knew if I did, he would find me and he would kill me. They informed me that in the state we were living at the time, there was no such thing as self-defense. And because I admitted to attempting to kick him to keep myself from being knocked out, I would be taken to jail for domestic violence. Sometime I will tell you about my jail experience, because that was a weird ordeal in and of itself. Many of the girls realized I was not cut out for the experience and took on a motherly, protective nature towards me. It was clear I had been through an ordeal, as my face was bruised. And I didn't exactly blend in for whatever reason. It probably wasn't hard enough. But it was then that I learned women in the state were often taken to jail too, so that they could use their charges being dropped as leverage to get them to testify against the abuser. On a side note, it was kind of passed around the jail while I was in there that you always say yes to pressing charges in that state, because that way you didn't go to jail, and then you could later drop the charges, and usually the state didn't pursue them. His charges were dropped after he completed a joke of an abuser education program, where he basically learned how to work the system. He often took the stance that I made him do it. He painted me as crazy to all of his friends and family, saying I was very jealous and manipulative. He literally made me feel like I was crazy. He would often explain how things really happened. And because of my childhood trauma, he played it perfectly, convincing me that I was the problem. He was
extra abusive whenever I would become pregnant, even though he would intentionally get me pregnant. It was as though at first he thought he had me once we were married, because it was like the moment the ink was dry on the marriage license, he turned into a different person. But since divorcing was simple enough, he felt he could further trap me with children, because he and his family heavily pushed a Catholic narrative of our son needing his father. He used a lot of isolation and making me believe that no one else would see any value in me, because I was this unlovable being who was frankly a burden on everyone. He would brutally abuse me and to punish me when he would claim I was acting crazy or failing to live up to his standards of a housewife. He degraded me for my weight on a daily basis. He broke my arm on my birthday 1 year before we eventually split up. And I lost 2 pregnancies, and often wondered if it was due to the abuse. He would say things like, "Your face isn't pregnant." I never knew when his attacks would come, as they were often seemingly out of nowhere. For example, one night I had prepared dinner. I had made one of his favorite meals, tortellini. And on that occasion, he was once again fixated on my weight. I sat down with my food, and he became angry that I felt like I deserved to eat, seeing as he felt I was not attractive enough, nor had I shedded weight for him after losing my last pregnancy in the 2nd trimester. He got up from where we were eating and went into the office. He came back with lighter fluid and covered me and my food in it. He then started lighting matches and flicking them at me in front of our toddler. I ran out of the house in an attempt to avoid being set on fire, and he followed me, picking me up and throwing me in the apartment's dumpster. He then went inside and locked the door. I became panicked, fearing what he would do to our toddler, who I could hear crying and screaming. We lived in a literal ghost town. The population was like 11. Eventually, he unlocked the door and told me that I needed to lose weight, and that if I tried to report it to anyone, he would make sure I never saw our son again. That he would make sure the police knew I was crazy and an unfit mother. And since he wanted nothing to do with her son, he would be put up for adoption. Having delivered my 2nd son, stillborn at 5 months, I was terrified of losing my living child. present at the hospital while I delivered. But as soon as it was time to deliver, he excused himself for a cigarette break. I got the opportunity to hold my baby and say goodbye. He wouldn't even look in my direction until he was sure that they had taken the baby out of the room. When I lost the second pregnancy at 4 months, he pushed the narrative that I was crazy from grief and almost got me committed. But he realized that that would leave him to care for her son alone. When I saw that police body cam footage, I knew. Where other people saw Gabby as the aggressor, I saw her as someone else in domestic violence. She was conditioned to take all the responsibility. He had tried to take her man. I've been there. I also was locked in my car once while I was pregnant with Jacob, and he broke out my car window. I had to tell people I was in a car accident because, yet again, my face wasn't pregnant. So this whole side of my face, he burst all the blood vessels in my eye, and it literally, just this whole side of my face, showed trauma. To the point I had to put a sign on myself while I was cashiering. Yes, I know what my face looks like. It does hurt. Can we please not talk about it? Twice I convinced him to take me to the hospital for my injuries. But it was after days of him feeding me the narrative of what really happened to ensure it would not come back on him. Do you know what I learned from my arrest? That I was not allowed to fight back. I wonder if that's how Gabby felt after being labeled the aggressor. When other people buy into the abuser's narrative, it further makes you question your own sanity, as she was clearly already doing in that video. The other thing I can't get over is him saying that he was yelling at her to snap her out of it. My abuser would often scream at the top of his lungs, pressed directly up against my ear. It was an intimidation tactic. It affected my hearing, and it's really hard to think when someone's doing that to you. He often injured my hands and my feet to make it hard for me to get away. But he could literally go from being incredibly abusive to turning on the charm to convince others that I was crazy in a split second. To the point he abused me in front of his best friend. And his best friend's response was, "Come on, man, she's not worth it." And I honestly thought he was my friend, too. So to hear him say that just made me feel like the problem again. He would also drive erratically with me and my son in the car to intimidate me and let me know that he could end my life. Driving at high speeds, swerving, threatening to drive us into things, braking while driving incredibly fast, or trying to throw me from the car. Our brakes in the truck we drove were even destroyed once due to this behavior. We had to drive to a meeting with a new potential landlord without brakes because he had caused the lines to blow by intimidating me, driving well over the speed that our speedometer was capable of clocking, or however you say it, and then slamming on the brakes to show me how easily he could unbuckle my seatbelt and send me through the windshield, or cause our son to die. So while many saw Gabby Petito as the aggressor, I challenged that and say she was the victim. The officer at one point did say she had marks too. I believe she was acting in self-defense, but due to the extensive abuse she had already been through, she may have truly believed that it was her fault. She had been made to feel crazy. She had been made to feel worthless. You could kind of tell by the way she was staring, as though she could see through things, and using her hands to almost make the rehearsed story feel real. Because I remember doing that. I remember having to imagine how everything would have taken place for the story he gave me to make sense, and so that I would be ready and not screw up. Every idea I ever had when I was with my partner, he labeled as retarded. Those were his exact words. He belittled me so I would give up on ever aspiring to be more than his pawn, unless he could somehow take credit for my actions. I have dealt with a lot of anger because he never received jail time, despite being convicted of a felony. based on the incident he was arrested for. How could that be justice? But this case, and seeing experts on things like body language react to that video, made me realize how convincing narcissistic abusers are. When I was packing up my things, covered in bruises, people looked me in the eye and said, I hope you guys work things out. Everybody goes through rough patches. Yet again, I wondered if I was the crazy one, if I was doing the right thing. And leaving was so hard. I felt like I had failed. I couldn't be the woman I needed to be for him, to not want to do these things to me. I wasn't strong enough to keep my family together. And at that point, it felt like no one even believed me anyways. My mom had encouraged me to reach out to a family member for help. And he told me not to leave. He told me to get a gun. And that if he came back, I should shoot him. But how would I shoot him? Jacob was always with me. Was I supposed to act like him and murder him in front of our son? And starting over with nothing was also hard. Everyone had an opinion on what I should do.
They pointed me to resources for women in my situation. And to be perfectly honest, they were bullshit. No actual help was offered. If anything, I obtained more trauma, to the point I wondered if I should just go back to the abuse, because I knew what I had lived through. And if I didn't live, was it really worse than how hard things were with everyone judging me? Even my loved ones said things that still haunt me. Sorry, I'm having lots of issues tonight. He may have taken Gabby's voice, but I still have mine. And it's very important to me that I use it to help the other women who are still in domestic violence. Someone, I am not going to name names as it doesn't do anything good, but someone said to me as I was depressed and struggling, trying to figure out how to build a new life for my son and I from nothing. At least when he was abusing you, your house was clean. And someone else said the
understand how I ended up in domestic violence because they thought I was smart. The trolls don't realize how they are setting back the women in domestic violence who are watching them paint her as the villain. It happened to me as trial. They made up all kinds of crazy stories, trying to paint me as an evil person. Because they couldn't argue that he didn't do it. There was too much evidence for that. So they had to try to make it seem as though I was just as bad as him. It wouldn't serve them to have people realize that I was a victim of domestic violence. I had to seem like an active and willing participant. I had to seem like someone who deserved it. How messed up is that? There's no defense. For physically abusing me. Unless I deserved it. This man made me believe he would kill me, my child, my friends, and my entire family. I still live in fear over 5 years later. I don't know that I will ever feel safe again while he is alive and free. People who have been through this type of abuse can recognize it. They saw right through that video that experts couldn't. Unfortunately, it's too late for Gabby and so many others. And there are women out there right now telling themselves, my relationship isn't like that. He loves me. He wants to change. He's never had someone fight for him. Fight for him. And to those women, I would say, someone who loves you truly loves you. They couldn't hurt you in those ways. If you have to make justifications for the other person's behavior, or take responsibility yourself for them hurting you, then you need to leave now. I can't promise you it will be easy, but I can tell you that you will never know actual happiness until you leave. If someone makes you feel hard to love, that is a flaming red flag. There is help out there. Make sure you have copies of your police reports, as that can open doors, including to things like housing, programs. Don't let your abuser know about your plans to leave, but get out. Love doesn't conquer all. You can't love the other person enough for both of you. I get it. I was you. The only way to survive in that life is to tell yourself, it isn't that bad. It's not as bad as other people think. Whereas it's not as bad as other people have it. That's what I told myself. And when I escaped, experts who helped me process my trauma said my domestic violence was some of the worst they've seen. But I didn't think it was that bad. Imagine how the people you care about will feel when they get the call that your body has been recovered. They will always wonder if they could have saved you. Please, be your own hero and save yourself. You're so much stronger than you think you are, or than they've made you believe that you are. This is a lot. It's a lot to put on the internet. It's just a lot. I've been through a lot. And I'm telling you, there is light on the other side. It's our turn to use our voices. For all the women who can't use theirs. For all the women who've been silenced. I was that little girl who said, the first time he hits me, I'll leave. But there's so much more to it than that. It's so complicated. And we watch too much Disney crap that tells us that love conquers all, and that he'll want to be a better person. You know, for you or whatever. I just don't feel like I can sit here silent anymore. People are dying. And they don't have to. We've been force-fed this BS image that an abused woman is this shrinking violet wearing sunglasses and long sleeves, and it's just not that easy. It's not that simple. It doesn't happen to a certain kind of woman or stupid women or anything like that. A lot of times it happens to good women because they don't want other people to have to pay for their mistakes. They don't want other people's lives to be a risk for the choices they made. It's almost like sometimes when you get caught up in domestic violence, it feels like that's the only way you can make it right. If you don't try to escape, if you don't let your partner do things to the people you care about, my friend, when she messaged me today, she told me she wished that there was something she could have said to get me out sooner. But domestic violence is a lot like drug addiction in that you can't help the person until they're ready to accept the help. And sometimes it's because they think they're protecting you. She said, "You know I'm your ride or die." And that was the problem. I knew that she would die for me. I knew my parents would die for me. And I knew what he was capable of. And it wasn't fair of me to ask that of anyone. And luckily, I got the opportunity where I knew there would be enough eyes on him that he couldn't get away with something like that. But not everybody gets that chance. And as hard as you're trying to save them, they're trying to save you too. And I just can't sit there anymore and listen to people say horrible things about this poor girl. Because I saw my abuser on that tape. I felt those feelings. I felt those feelings. And I'm done keeping quiet and being polite about it. It's time for us to use our voices and to say, this can't be okay anymore. Period.